There's a new chief of staff at the presidency. Local Government and Rural Development Minister Julius Deborah is the new man taking over from Prosper Bani, who, according to a statement from the Minister of Communications, has been appointed an ambassador extraordinaire and plenipotentiary. Julius Deborah will be assisted by the Deputy Minister for Works and Housing, Barima Osei Asare, who has now been reassigned to the Flagstaff House. There were other appointments and reassignments in the statement. Babaisi Kamara, a senior advisor for special duties at the Flagstaff House, is a new national security advisor. William K. Aboa is also taking up the position of an advisor responsible for the restructuring of NACOB into a commission. He will also assume the chairmanship of the NACOB when the board is constituted. Now, the appointments and exits may just be that for the ordinary man, but political watchers and governance analysts say there is much more to it. And that's today's big story. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. We'll be back shortly. Today's big story is proudly brought to you by Lifeline Properties. So why this shake-up at the presidency? And what is it that the political analysts are seeing that we ought to know? Well, earlier on, I spoke with Evans Mensah. He's the host of Top Story on our sister media outlet Joy FM, and he is with the political desk. Let's see what he is saying. So what do you make of the shake-up at the presidency? Does it give you a signal that the president is gearing up for the 2016 elections?
Well, from what my sources tell me, that's the bottom line. The president has made these changes with 2016 in mind. Let's put it this way. In sum, this is politics over policy. He's had those who their strengths were essentially policies. The incumbent who is currently outgoing, Mr. Bani, was seen as a policy person. He could bring you that sort of, policy thinking, policy proposals, etc. So was Valerie Sawyer, his deputy. But he decided that going into 2016, he needs a change. People who can, do the political wheeling and dealing for him. But also, most importantly, because of what Mr. Bani did during his tenure. Yes, he was a policy man, but he alienated the Flagstaff House so much when you look at its relationship with the big wigs in the party, the movers and the shakers, those who've run the affairs of the party, got the party to its current state of, an incumbent ruling, party, to the point that a lot of the people vocally and indeed publicly condemn what was happening. We can talk about the current majority leader, Alban Baldwin, publicly, criticized the fact that he had been cut off from the presidency. The only gateway to the president is through the chief of staff, and he complained about that. Some party executives also did the same, and so the bridges were burnt, relationships were destroyed. Because the access to the president wasn't there. The party executives and the foot soldiers, the rank and file, began to complain. So going to the election, the president needs the internal support. You need the Bagwings of this world, the Cletus of workers of this world to back you fully going to the election. That's why he's brought in, essentially, a man who can do that. So
you mean Prosper Bani out and Julius Deborah in? But many thought that Julius Deborah was doing quite well in his ministry and he could have done fantastic if he was retained in his ministry. You think why the president will ignore all of these concerns and still go in for Julius Deborah?
See, Julius Deborah's main role is he's going to be the chief diplomat now. For now, that's what he's going to do. He's going to try and mend the broken relationships. Now, the president needs to weigh. You want to keep him at local government and risk losing an election because you don't have the support of the entire grassroots, the rank and file of the party. Now it's about winning an election. You can always find somebody for local government. You know what I mean? And if you think back to what I said, this is politics over policy. The president believes 2 years to go with an economic crisis on your hand, energy crisis on your hand, with people within the party, very influential folks, unhappy with you. You need somebody to do that. Listen, one of the key things they've said about the strengths of Julius Debra is the fact that he is a nice guy. I've met him before personally, and he comes across as a nice guy. He can bring you into the fold. That is what he's supposed to do. But the question is, can he politically maneuver to the point of winning over all these very powerful, influential folks in the party? My conclusion is, yes, he can do that, because this decision was not the president's sole decision. We all know there were meetings between the president and the party's executives in which names were thrown out, and it was a consensus name. The party proposed that this is our man. We think he can, you know, mend those bridges and make us comfortable coming to the Flagstaff House. The president wanted to balance that with the technocrats still, and so he got his way with Julius's deputy now, Johnny Kofi Osei, who is a technocrat at KNUST, but also has a bit of grassroots support. So the president is managing to blend both. And so going into 2016, it's very, very possible, Aisha, that between now and January 2016, if Julius manages to mend those bridges and brings everybody else back into the fold, the president might decide that you've done your job, let me bring in somebody who can now do the bolts and not the hard balling to get us into 2016.
But from where you stand, you think Julius Debra is good for this kind of job we're looking at?
Absolutely. I think he's good for this kind of job. Where he will have a challenge is after he's dealt with the bigwigs, the disgruntled bigwigs in the party, he would then need to reach out to the foot soldiers, who by extension, because they're favorites, so the Bagbin and his people in the constituency who supported him, the youth groups there, because they became disenchanted because they saw Bagbin as being alienated, they also began to show apathy towards the presidency and what he stood for. So for the Julius Debra, reaching out beyond Bagbin to those youth groups, etc., will be the key challenge. Why am I saying that? If you look at Julius Debra's political history, I mean his performance over the years, he started off as the Eastern Regional Chairman of the NDC, and then from then he wanted to contest as a parliamentary candidate for the party. He stood in their primaries and he won that very comfortably. He got just under 200 votes. The second person who came close had just under 30. That's a huge margin. So in the Eastern region, as far as the party is concerned, he had the support. Now, beyond the primaries, he stood on the party's ticket for Suhum to contest the seat for the parliament. He went up against the MPP's candidate, Frederick Oparian-San, and he lost. And he lost that. He tried that several times, and he lost. So people look at that and say, and the interesting thing about that is he ran a campaign based on the fact that he believed, as a chairman of the party in the Eastern region, that the NDC needed to gain more grounds in a region which was seen as fundamentally that of a stronghold of the MPP. But when it came to him challenging that, because if his friends had won against Oparian-San, he would have really been a huge plus for him. But he failed to do that. So the question then becomes, when it gets to the point where he needs to move beyond the bigwigs and then convince the grassroots, does he have the political ability to galvanize that base, to back the president the way the president would want to? And his political career shows that that is where he might be found wanting. And therefore, some have argued, all he needs to do is to get a Babin, for Babin, for example, to win back those of his supporters who were disgruntled because he was cut out. Get Cletus Avoka to do the same, get E.T. Mensah to do the same, you know, and then you'll be okay. So that's what his challenge will be. If he's going to focus on that himself, he's going to have a challenge. But if he's going to focus on the big wigs to do the job for him after he's brought them in, it should be smooth sailing.
But come to think of it, you call it politics over policy. I call it power over the country's interest. Do we care how he wants to win power? Shouldn't be the nation's interest. That should be at stake at this moment, rather than bringing in somebody who you feel should just bridge gaps in the party.
Well, you have a point. I mean, it's that is the argument that any governance person will argue, will put forward. But truth be told, with 22 months on election, with the power crisis on your hand, with an economy in crisis, listen, the president's primary focus now, and I said in the beginning that this decision, these changes, the party had a strong hand in them, is how do I win the 2016 elections in spite of all the challenges I've had? I will leave my ministers, the finance minister, to do the policies, to try and solve the problem. I've appointed a power minister, there's an energy ministry. Those are the key areas that will determine, and I have a fantastic, he thinks, education minister and a strong, economic sector. So for him, I have the people who can deliver that. My job now is how to galvanize the people within my own party who can support me deliver victory. And that is why Julius had been brought in. He's Mr. Nice Guy, people will like him, and therefore, by extension, they'll begin to...
So that was Joy FM's Evans Mensah. On the phone right now is Dr. Opoku-Edu. He is a political scientist at the University of Ghana. He will help us digest the issue at stake. Good evening, sir. Thanks for joining me. Well, we lost Dr. Julius Deborah, but listening to Evans Mensah, that gives us an indication or a signal that the president is rather thinking of 2016, but appointing Julius Deborah over Prosper Bani. Well, I'm told Dr. Edu is back on the line. Good evening, sir, and thanks for joining me.
Yeah, good evening.
Well, people like Dr. Sule Garba, Prosper Bani, who have exited the presidency, come across generally as technocrats who are likely to implement policies without giving so much consideration to how it will hurt or aid the party. So why would the president replace such a person or such people at this time, especially with Julius Deborah, who many know is a party person?
Well, I think if the president was satisfied with the performance of these people, he wouldn't be doing away with them. So there must be a reason behind it, and the only reason might be that they are not performing satisfactorily. I think that position, for example, the chief of staff, is an extremely important position, and in some places, like the U.S., sometimes they refer to them as the power behind the throne. So whoever occupies that position must be someone who is very sharp and someone who understands the political terrain and someone who can unite. Because don't forget that the NDC is going to the next election, having won 2 elections, and they need all they can mobilize to be able to go into that. Among them, the kind of unity that they need. So if the party is not satisfied and the party looks a bit divided or worried, then there's every reason to change the team. So I think, to begin with, if the president was satisfied with these people, then he would still maintain them, notwithstanding anybody's dissenting views about them. So I think he's not satisfied with them, and I think they also think that it is not in the long-term interest of the party to maintain them. That's why they've asked them to go.
So from where you stand, you think Julius Deborah is the best choice to do this kind of job?
Well, I think that's what the party wants. They want somebody there who will receive them, because, for example, as the chief of staff, you have so much influence and power at the presidency. You determine who is able to see the president and so on. The party may have interest in seeing him most often, and they want somebody there who would always give them the chance to talk to the president or to see the president. And so for the party, that is okay. Now, as to whether this man has the professional competence to be able to manage the presidency in ways that will contribute to achieving whatever vision the president has is another matter. But as I expect politics is made up of sense and nonsense. Sometimes things are done that are illogical and nonsensical, and yet they do happen. I don't know much about his professional competence, but I think that the party seems to be interested in the person of his sort to be at the presidency, and that's what the president has done.
I want you to hold on for a while because we are picking signals. Even though he is the president of the nation, he must have a strategy to win the upcoming election so he can continue to rule. In other words, the changes could have been would have more to do with politics than policy, so that Julius Deborah replacing Prosper Bani is just a win back the party faithful strategy. Is that what it really is? We spoke with the national organizer of the National Democratic Congress, Kofi Adams. Let's hear what he says.
Is that my question?
No, I'm asking you to hold on whilst we listen to Kofi Adams.
The work that he's supposed to do as just chief of staff, and I believe that is a wrong perception. We may have style. Julius is an activist person. He's one who may want to go down there, possibly because he served party executive position before and has been a candidate, who may engage a lot more than others. But for me, I see it as style. Look, Nana Todazi, I've known as chief of staff under President Rawlings, was not regularly out there. He wasn't, but he functioned very well as chief of staff. President Kufuor came in, he had Jacob Ichebilamte for a short while and changed him, brought in Kojom Pienim, who also lasted for quite a longer time. He had a style. Both of them had different style of approach. Mr. Martin Newman came in under late President Mills. He had a style. I don't think that he was engaging that regularly with party executive. I don't seriously remember any single engagement that he as chief of staff had along with party executive. He had his style. There were other structures that were functioning. Then comes in Prosper Bani. He also had his style. And I don't think that the chief of staff, we should abandon our responsibility and say that the chief of staff should come and do it for us. I don't think we are going to sit down idle and allow pressure to be brought to all kinds of pressure on the current chief of staff. We have to help him to succeed. There's a job to be done. The president feels that he can do the job from where Mr. Prosper Bani left off and be able to carry his government to the next higher level. I don't think for once that we are going to sit here and just fold our arms and think that Honorable Julius Deborah.
That was Kofi Adams, he's the national organizer for the NDC. Dr. Edu, if you're still on the line, with a country which is facing economic challenges of this nature and also having problems with its energy sector, you think that shouldn't be a critical issue for the president to consider at this moment rather than thinking of winning power in 2016?
Well, under normal circumstances, one would expect the president to be thinking seriously about economic difficulties because, of course, there's going to be a link between the economic performance and their fortunes in 2016. So it will not make sense for the president to delink the two. They are linked in a very fundamental way. But I think that whoever manages, controls, and directs affairs at the presidency is equally important. He needs to have somebody who, as I've said, understands the terrain, someone who is sharp, someone. For example, if you look at history, the person like Joseph Stalin had a very wonderful chief of staff who could remember names and faces, so at any time he was just beside, Joseph Stalin. And in the U.S. now, we have a similar guy who is so good, So you need someone who will be a team player, who will mobilize everybody, who will let everybody be happy, and so on and so forth. And such a person need not be necessarily too technical. He needs to be efficient and be someone who can really manage and organize the office of the president. So the two go hand in hand. The president cannot act effectively and achieve whatever visions he has if he does not have someone as a chief of staff who really understands and shares his vision and who has got what it takes, who has got the professional competence to help bring it about. So while the president is thinking about 2016 maybe, he cannot afford to lose control of the very serious economic difficulties that the country is going through today. Because whether he likes it or not, people are going to vote. And of course, not many people vote on the basis of issues, But for those who do, and by and large that number is increasing, people are going to vote on the basis of his performance.
Let's look at an appointment or a position like that of the Chief of Staff. Is it a position that should be changed overnight? Anytime, any soon, we can just get up and be changing a position like that of the Chief of Staff?
You mean whether it's a position that can be changed overnight?
Is it a position that should be changed frequently?
Well, it shouldn't, because you need some continuity. But if it becomes necessary, then you must. I think whoever is coming now needs to understand, needs to be briefed on what has been done and so on and so forth. I think the best thing is to have someone, if the person is efficient and professionally competent, to be there throughout the 4-year term of the president, so that the person will be so knowledgeable as to be able to assist the president. So all things being equal, under normal circumstances, you shouldn't be changing that person. But as I've said, if the conditions demand, if people are not happy, if results are not being achieved, if the person is proven to be professionally incompetent, then of course you need to change them.
And so let's look at the opposition's take on this. How would the opposition see this through the lens of an opposition party? How would they see the president in making such a choice, which people perceive as a political choice rather than a national interest position?
Well, first of all, I think the opposition is likely to think that the person is being changed because things are not done properly. And of course, I expect you know, the country is going through very difficult times at the moment. And so, and as we prepare to meet the World Bank and all the conditionalities that come with it, the president would need to also, sit up and make sure that his office is the best well organized or most well organized. So the opposition is likely to say that, look, we told you things are not going well. And that probably they will also say that, well, the problem is not just with the chief of staff. The problem is with the direction. The problem is with control. The problem is with discipline, financial discipline, and so on. So they are not, I'm sure they would be saying, well, things are not going well. That's why you are changing this man. But that is not changing him will not solve the problems. And I expect the opposition in the days to come to highlight other critical issues, like financial discipline, like issues of corruption, more and more, and so on. So the opposition might not necessarily be satisfied with it. Neither are they going to say that this is not important. We cannot altogether ignore this. It's important that the change has come, but the change itself indicates that there's something wrong, and that what is wrong is far bigger than this change. And I'm sure the opposition is going to highlight this in the weeks to come.
Well, Dr. Edo, you may have to hang on one more time, because the appointment of Barima Osei Asare, a senior advisor for special duties at the Flagstaff House as the new national security advisor, has also raised eyebrows. Those who have been observing the political space for some time now feel his involvement in the Mabe and Johnson case makes him quite a controversial personality to be handed a sensitive position such as the national security advisor. Well, the Commission for Human Rights and Administrative Justice also has been investigating Baba Kamara and others since 2007. Emil Short was commissioner of charge then, and he spoke to us earlier on via phone. Let's take a listen.
Objected to our investigating him. He refused to submit to our investigation on the ground that he was a private individual, a businessman, and was not subject to the to Shraja's jurisdiction. And so we took the matter to the Supreme Court for an interpretation of the powers of the Commission and his objection. And the Supreme Court ruled that we had every justification and authority to investigate him, even though he was a private businessman, because the allegation was that he was involved in acts of corruption with other people who were public officials. So the Supreme Court gave us the mandate, the go-ahead, to proceed with our investigations against Baba Kamara, as well as the other officials.
Now, at the height of this controversy, this bribery scandal, I remember Mr. Kamara denying not cooperating with Shraj, saying that he had nothing to hide. So, as it stands, is he still a subject of investigation? Is Shraj still investigating Baba Kamara?
Yes, actually, when we started the investigation, which involved Baba Kamara as well as other former ministers of state, there was an action that went to the High Court, the Human Rights Court, which tried to prohibit us from proceeding with the investigation on the ground that I had made certain prejudicial statements in an interview I gave to Metro TV. The Court of Appeal eventually rejected the High Court decision that we should be prohibited from continuing with our investigation. So the case was referred, the matter was referred back to Shraj for us to continue with our investigation. So as it stands today, the matter is still with Shraj. And when it was referred to Shraj, I had left Shraj. So I don't know what happened to the case. But to the best of my knowledge, the matter is still under investigation, and it's within, Shraj's mandate.
That was former Shraj Commissioner Emil Short. Dr. Edu, if you can hear me, let's look at Baba Kamara's position. What implication has it got to do with the country's security as far as his appointment as National Security Advisor is concerned?
Well, I'm listening to Emil Short. I think there's a problem here. First of all, this man is supposed to be, with this new appointment, supposed to be a very important figure within the intelligence community in this country. Now, if he was the national security advisor and he came under investigation, the normal thing would be for him to step aside so that the investigations can go on. Now, if he's already under investigations and you appoint him, then there's a problem because of the possibility of conflict of interest. And so, as somebody who occupies such a high place within the, as I've said, the intelligence community, it will be extremely difficult to see how justice will be served. And so I think it would have been better if the president had waited till the matter is dealt with before appointing him to that position. And I think people within the Shraj and other intelligence sectors of the country who may be involved in interrogating him and so on and so forth might find it extremely difficult to do that because of the position he's going to occupy from today. And so it has implications for the justice system, and fairness and justice would have demanded that the matter would have been brought to a close before being appointed to such a sensitive position within the intelligence community.
By this, will citizens be justified to take the president on?
Yes, they would, because no one is above the law, and the person actually is now the subject of investigations. Why appoint him to such a high position within the national security or the intelligence community? So there is the possibility of obstruction of justice, which every Ghanaian ought to be worried about. And so people would be right in taking the president on for appointing someone who is under investigation for a serious thing as corruption.
Well, many thanks to you, Dr. Edu. He is with the University of Ghana, and he's been telling us what the politicians or political scientists are seeing with the changes at the presidency that we do not know. We'll take a short break. When we come back, it's Joy News Interactive.